For 49-year-old Suzanne Morphew, life in Maysville, Colorado, was good. She was a passionate hiker, a devoted mother to 2 children, and well-loved in her community. But on the 10th of May, 2020, after going for a bike ride, Suzanne vanished. But before then, Suzanne told her friend that she acquired a spy pen because she suspected her husband was having an affair and hoped to use the pen to gather evidence. But in a shocking twist, when investigators heard what the pen had recorded, to their surprise they heard intimate conversations between Suzanne Morphew and someone unfamiliar to her husband. In the quiet mountain town of Maysville, Colorado, on May 10, 2020, Mother's Day, Suzanne Morphew prepared for what should have been a peaceful morning bike ride. But by sunset, that peace would shatter. Her bike would be found tossed off a remote trail, her helmet miles away, and Suzanne herself gone. No signs of struggle. No witnesses. Just absence. The story that followed would divide a family, fracture a community, and pull national attention into the life and marriage of a woman whose smile once lit up every room she walked into. Was this a tragic accident? A planned disappearance? Or something far darker, lurking within the walls of her own home? Because behind every picture-perfect life, there's always a moment when the cracks begin to show. And for Suzanne Morphew, that moment came long before Mother's Day. On the surface, her life looked peaceful. A devoted mother, a wife of many years, and someone who loved the outdoors. But as anyone who truly knew her will tell you, Suzanne's real story was far richer, far more complex, than the headlines ever showed. Born on April 30, 1971, Suzanne grew up in Alexandria, Indiana. She had 2 siblings, a brother, Andrew, and a sister, Melinda, and from early on, she carried herself with a quiet strength and a warmth that drew others in. In high school, she met Barry Morphew. Then a star baseball player, she a friendly, outgoing young woman. Their friendship blossomed into love and eventually marriage in 1994. Barry started a landscaping business and Suzanne was a schoolteacher before leaving the job to raise their 2 daughters, Mallory and Macy. For a time, they seemed to fit the classic American dream. 2 daughters, Mallory and Macy, a home in Maysville/Salida, Colorado, a place where weekends meant mountain biking and dinners meant laughter on the porch. Suzanne stood about 5'4", weighed around 120 pounds, with blue eyes that reflected her kindness and brown hair that caught the mountain sunlight. She had battled cancer, not once but twice, and through every chemo treatment she pushed forward, refusing to let the disease define her. Her friends remember her as a light in the room. Jeff Isles, a longtime friend, said of Suzanne and Barry, "They fit that provider and homemaker picture to a T." But Suzanne's true passion lay beyond the kitchen and the home. She loved the mountains, the fresh air, the winding trails, her mountain bike under her feet. On Mother's Day 2020, she decided to set out for a ride she described as just a few hours, a routine she had done many times before. She wore her gear, she mounted her bike, she waved goodbye. No one expected the ride she took would be her last. Outside her home, she planted flowers every spring, bright colors that reminded her of her students in Indiana, of the time she taught before becoming a full-time mom. She kept her journals, filled with reflections such as, "I want my daughters to know that kindness is courage." And she meant it. Suzanne volunteered at the local school, helped with bake sales, greeted new families in town as though they were her own. She was the kind of person neighbors described as the one we all trusted. 2 things stand out when you look at Suzanne's life: her bravery in the face of illness and her unwavering love for her girls. When the news of her disappearance spread, the wider world saw a missing person, but to her daughters, she was their anchor. Mallory described her as the mom who made us pancakes, the guide who taught us to find our own voice. Then, just before she vanished, her life quietly shifted. The evening ride stopped. Dinner conversations grew clip. Journals left open on kitchen tables. The colors of her porch flowers dulled. The light in her eyes dimmed, just a little. But here's the thing. Even in those final weeks, Suzanne showed bravery. She had faced cancer. She believed in the good that people could do. She still journaled about better days. She still said to her friends, "We deserve more clarity. We deserve peace." And as we step into the next chapter of her story, into the ride that never ended, the mountain trail that led to questions no one wanted to ask, we carry with us the memory of who she was. A mother, a mountain lover, a teacher at heart, a light in the wilderness. Before pain, before suspicion, before the night that changed everything, this was Suzanne Morphew. According to friends, the Morphews moved from Indiana to a home just outside of Salida, Colorado, to be closer to their older daughter, Mallory, who was attending college nearby. But there were also rumors that the move was an attempt at a fresh start for Suzanne and Barry's troubled marriage. Early in the morning on May 10, 2020, 49-year-old Suzanne Morphew planned a ride. She tightened her helmet. She mounted her bike and off she went, while Barry left his home just outside of Salida, Colorado, to drive to a job site 150 miles away in Broomfield, Colorado. The couple's daughters, who were away on a camping trip and making their way home, when one of them texted their mother, wishing her a happy Mother's Day, but she didn't respond. Mallory informed her father that she and her sister were unable to reach Suzanne. Barry eventually spoke to one of their neighbors and asked them to check on Suzanne and to see if her mountain bike was at the house. When they found no sign of her or her bike, Barry asks them to call the police. Instead of heading home immediately, Barry dropped off a shovel and some other tools for his co-workers at a hotel where he had booked rooms for them and himself. He began driving home a few minutes past 6 p.m. As news of Suzanne Morphew's disappearance shook the community and eventually the entire nation. By midnight, the investigation was underway. Searchlights swept hillsides. Helicopters flew low. Yet the mountain offered no sign, no answer. Local and state authorities, along with the FBI, CBI, and civilian volunteers, conducted a large search effort across vast and rugged terrain. Near the family home, detectives found Suzanne's bicycle off a remote trail, lying down a steep ravine, miles from the house road, the helmet discovered about a mile away. However, there was something odd. No signs of crash, no blood, no broken frame or battered helmet. The scene didn't match panic. It had the stillness of staging. 10 days after Suzanne Morphew was reported missing, investigators found a spy pen in a walk-in closet in the Morphews' master bedroom. They learnt that Suzanne got the pen, which is voice-activated and records conversations, hoping to catch her husband Barry in an affair. Instead, she inadvertently recorded conversations she had with her secret lover. It took 6 months for investigators to identify the man. It turned out he had a wife and 6 children in Michigan where he lived. He never came forward on his own after Suzanne vanished and took steps to hide their affair. But once agents came knocking, he cooperated and provided access to his DNA, phone records, and passwords for deleted accounts. Investigators were able to verify his alibi, and he was cleared. Inside the Morphew home, police logs noted Barry's phone pinged repeatedly around the property. The truck's data recorded door openings. Surveillance captured him disposing of trash at a hotel near his job site. His alibi? He said he had been cleaning up deer calls and chipmunk nuisances on the property. Investigators later described it as the chipmunk alibi. In the small town of Salida, a candlelight vigil formed hours later. Neighbors, hikers, friends gathered with photos and teal ribbons. Find Suzanne. They held hope in silence. On May 9th, the day before Mother's Day, records showed Suzanne Morphew and her lover messaged each other 59 times. At one point, Suzanne messaged her lover this selfie, which investigators dubbed her last proof of life photo. Barry, who was out running errands, sent Suzanne a text at 2:26 p.m. telling her he was on his way home. With no response from Suzanne, Barry texts her again, "Did you leave?" and again is met with silence. Investigators believe Barry returned home soon after, murdered Suzanne and cleaned up the crime scene. But if Barry knew nothing about Suzanne's affair, what motive would he have to take her life? One clue may be a deleted text that investigators found on Barry's phone, sent by Suzanne just days before. "I'm done. I could care less what you're up to and have been for years. We just need to figure this out civilly." What followed over the coming years would be a catalog of twist after twist. Hidden messages, tranquilizer sedatives meant for wildlife found in bone marrow, a pen that recorded conversations, and a husband whose alibi didn't hold. But the data told another story. His truck logged door activations, doors opening and closing repeatedly, the infotainment system showing reverse gear tests when he said he was sleeping in bed. Dig deeper and the phone pings widened like concentric rings on a pond. Barry's cell phone pinged all over the property on May 9th. His explanation? He was chasing chipmunks. Barry told investigators that he had shot 85 of them in the last 2 years, he said. The chipmunk alibi shocked even investigators. Why did the phone travel like someone moving quickly around a house, when chipmunks don't carry phones? And no neighbors heard any gunshots. However, investigators believe this unusual phone activity could be Barry chasing Suzanne around the house after shooting her with the tranquilizer gun. In the master bedroom, agents found another clue. A black door frame crack that wasn't there when the previous owner sold the house. When pressed, Barry said he had no idea what that's from. And an innocuous keycap, a clear plastic needle cap, lay in the dryer. A cap investigators believe is tied to a tranquilizer dart. Barry admitted he used a dart gun for deer, but he denied how that cap got in the dryer of his wife's clothes. The marriage facade crumbled. The pen, the phone pings, the crack in the door, all tell us someone wanted control. Someone feared losing it. Barry looked like the devoted husband, but the evidence told a different story. A story of tracking, of deleting texts, of trash runs at midnight, of disposing of items across hotel dumpsters. The video footage captured unknown items thrown away, not landscaping refuse. In a case where every clue raised more questions, investigators called this part the cover-up. Because when your everyday alibi is shooting chipmunks, you're potentially hiding something else entirely. What looked like a simple disappearance now began to feel like a trap. A house, a bike, a wife gone, and a husband whose story didn't hold. And behind the unsuspecting smile, the mountain air held its breath. Just when the mountain town thought the story couldn't twist any further, it did. Months after Suzanne vanished, investigators looking into Barry Morphew's every move stumbled on something no one expected. It wasn't about disappearance, DNA, or evidence from their home. It was about a ballot, one filled out in Suzanne's name. In late 2020, when Colorado election officials began cross-checking signatures, they noticed something strange. Suzanne's mail-in ballot had been returned, but Suzanne wasn't there to cast it. The signature didn't match hers exactly, but the address was correct. When questioned, Barry admitted he had sent in her ballot. His explanation stunned investigators. That single act, filling out and submitting a ballot in her name, became its own crime, voter fraud. In July 2022, Barry pleaded guilty to forgery, was fined and assessed $600 in court costs and avoided jail time with a plea deal. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man under suspicion for his wife's disappearance had, in his own words, used her voice, the last thing she could no longer give, to vote. For many, it became the emotional breaking point. If he could forge her vote so casually, what else was he capable of hiding? The act revealed something deeper about control and possession, the same quiet thread that investigators saw running through every clue. The case, which once looked like a tragedy in the mountains, was beginning to look like a carefully woven web of lies. And as the net of truth started closing, the forensics team prepared one final push. one that would use the newest tools of science to reveal the truth Suzanne could no longer speak. In May 2021, almost exactly 1 year after she vanished, Barry Morphew was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, evidence tampering, and other related crimes. Following a grand jury indictment, the initial charges against Barry Morphew were dismissed. For months, the Colorado mountains kept their silence. The trails Suzanne Morphew once biked were covered in pine needles and whispers, while her family clung to hope that somewhere, somehow, she might still be found. But beneath that silence, investigators were moving. Quietly, methodically, piece by piece. The first real shift came when data, digital breadcrumbs, started to tell a story no one had seen before. Barry's phone records, vehicle data, and surveillance footage didn't line up. Not even close. Authorities say Barry Morphew told them he went to bed around 8 p.m. on May 9th, but his truck's computer shows the truck was put in reverse and backed up towards the house around 9:30 p.m. But digital data said otherwise. His truck's movements showed unusual patterns, doors opening and closing multiple times before dawn, and his phone going in and out of airplane mode, as though someone was deliberately trying to leave no trace. In the early hours of Mother's Day, Barry's phone pinged near their home, again and again, before going silent for hours. When it came back online later that day, he said he was worried about Suzanne not answering. But investigators already knew. His digital footprint told a very different story. Then came another clue, hidden in plain sight: the tranquilizer gun. During the search of the Morphew home, officers discovered tranquilizer darts and animal sedative. Barry had said he used them for deer. But investigators quietly sent those darts for forensic testing, and the chemical traces matched the type that could incapacitate a person. The pieces were aligning. But prosecutors knew they couldn't rely on circumstantial evidence alone. They needed a body. They needed DNA. They needed proof that could survive the courtroom. By the time investigators had pieced together months of digital forensics, interviews, and surveillance, the case had shifted. Suzanne wasn't missing anymore, she was presumed dead. It had taken advanced analytics, relentless detective work, and quiet determination to get there. But in the end, the truth, no matter how carefully buried, had found its way into the light. Still, one thing remained painfully missing: Suzanne herself. No body had been found, and without it, questions still lingered like mist on the mountain air. The trial ahead would decide whether Barry's story would hold, or finally collapse under the weight of the truth. So they turned to technology. Genealogical databases, advanced soil sampling, GPS triangulation, tools that didn't exist when Suzanne disappeared, were all now being re-examined under a new lens. Investigators tracked Barry's truck's path that weekend, mapping every stop, every pause, every discarded trash bag. Dozens of forensic teams searched ravines, rivers, and mine shafts across Chaffee County. Prosecutors contend it's an important piece of evidence. They believe that when Barry Morphew arrived home the afternoon of May 9th, he went into the garage, took this cap off a syringe used to load a tranquilizer dart, injected the dart with a chemical, and shot Suzanne, though they failed to find a working tranquilizer gun or tranquilizer chemicals in the couple's home. Investigators soon learned that Barry's phone had been placed in airplane mode multiple times that morning, a curious decision for a man supposedly rushing to work. But when the device was finally switched back on, its data painted an entirely different picture of his timeline. He wasn't where he claimed to be. Barry also told police he had spent that morning tossing out trash in several locations. Investigators later found surveillance footage showing him stopping at multiple dumpsters across town, tossing away what he described as construction debris. The footage didn't show what was in the bags, but it added yet another layer to the growing suspicion. Detectives later admitted they believed Barry was disposing of evidence, the remnants of a hurried cover-up. While Barry's devices became a puzzle of inconsistencies, Suzanne's phone told a quiet, heartbreaking story. She had been texting a close friend about her crumbling marriage, confiding that she was scared, controlled, and ready to start a new chapter in life. Investigators also found messages suggesting she was reconnecting with an old high school flame, a relationship that gave her hope just as her marriage was disintegrating. It wasn't a motive in itself, but it painted a vivid picture of tension and control, of a woman yearning for freedom and a man who couldn't bear to lose it all. And then, one search zone hit. In a shallow, unmarked area miles from their home, search teams recovered human remains in September 2023. Dental records confirmed what her family had prayed and feared for 3 long years. It was Suzanne. Her remains were found accidentally as authorities were searching for another missing woman, not where Barry had said he last saw her, but near a remote area he had often hunted in. The final truth had waited in silence, buried under dirt and time, until science gave her a voice again. Barry Morphew was rearrested in 2023, charged once more in connection with her passing. What the case proved was chilling. Even when a suspect deletes texts, hides evidence, and tries to rewrite a timeline, technology remembers. And as investigators pieced together Suzanne's digital and physical trail, the shadows around her final hours began to clear. The charge carried the entire weight of her disappearance, the discovery of her remains in a shallow grave in 2023, and the advanced forensic findings that, together, had cracked open a case once thought cold. The prosecution presented layered testimony. They introduced evidence of cellular pings around the Morphew property after Suzanne's ride. They detailed the presence of a rare sedative drug cocktail in her bone marrow, used to tranquilize wildlife, a compound Barry alone in that region had access to. They laid out the timeline: the bike found abandoned, the helmet miles away, the phone silent. They showed the truck's data, the deleted messages, the changed phone settings. With each slide, the courtroom leaned forward. Opposing them sat the defense, arguing that the case still lacked direct eyewitness testimony and that the body was found far from the initial scene, introducing uncertainty. They reminded the jury that Barry had never been convicted and pleaded his continuing innocence. But the indictment stated that Suzanne Morphew's bones were moved to that location after her body had decomposed elsewhere, meaning it had to have been moved at least twice after her murder. She was not initially killed in the San Luis Valley. She was moved there. That was not her first grave. In addition, tests revealed that in Suzanne Morphew's bone marrow, the chief toxicologist found a mixture of 3 chemicals known as BM. The compound is used to tranquilize wildlife, and the indictment noted that Barry Morphew has admitted using those drugs to tranquilize deer. He had even admitted to authorities that, 1 month before Suzanne Morphew disappeared, he had used those chemicals to tranquilize a deer near the breezeway of the Morphew residence. The chemical compound takes several minutes to cause sedation. The indictment states tests found that Suzanne's death was not immediate following BM exposure because Suzanne Morphew's body had begun to metabolize the sedative before life was taken. On June 20, 2025, Barry Morphew was rearrested near Phoenix, Arizona, and charged with first-degree murder in the death of his wife, Suzanne Morphew. Detectives with the Arizona Department of Public Safety reportedly apprehended him without incident during a traffic stop after spotting a black Ford pickup registered in his name. Morphew, who had been living in Arizona, is being held on $3 million cash-only bail and has been extradited to Colorado. Barry Morphew continues to maintain his innocence. This is Brief Crime. Don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. See you in our next case.